Okay. Ready? It is 3 o'clock, so we will get started with the special meeting of the county council. We'll start with roll call. Here. Here.
Jonathan Myers,
Here.
Rob Henderson,
Present.
Mike Myers,
Here. Always gotta be different.
Linda Reesemer is absent.
Next is the invocation. Pete, would you lead us, please?
You bet. We take a moment to pray. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to have this special meeting. We pray that they'll be with us as we listen to the information and make decisions. We pray that we do so in the best interest of the taxpayers, citizens, and the county employees. And we pray that this council be fair and consistent, and we pray for safe travel home, and we pray for these things in Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge of allegiance. Stand. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are going to add an item prior to adjournment. Item D will be old business to discuss changing of our meeting with Mike Reuter on the 6th. He is unable to make it, so we'll get to that at the end. Or actually, Amy, I may not be able to stay till the end. Is there any problem with putting that in the front? Okay, let's do that now. Mike sent an email stating that he is already booked at 8:30 a.m. on September 6th. He advised that he is available on the 7th, 8th, or 9th, or that he can come in anytime after 11 a.m. on the 6th. So would anyone be opposed to changing the date to the 7th, 8th, or 9th?
Of what month?
September. And for the record, Melinda Reesemer has arrived.
So I would propose we keep as published and ask Mike to join us, maybe after our lunch break that afternoon, if that's an option for him, or maybe just prior to our lunch break. My personal opinion, when Mike gives an update, I always appreciate it and listen to it, but I really take it in totality. So I listen to day 1, day 2, and then day 3, I kind of call it 3 days before I kind of really start making bigger decisions. So I don't know that him not being here at 8 versus at noon is, to me, not all that relevant. And that way we can stick with what's advertised as far as our published dates.
I'm fine with that. What's the agreed?
Okay.
All right, then I would entertain a motion, Rob.
Motion to keep our dates and ask Mike Reuter to join us prior to our lunch break or immediately following our lunch break on that first day of reading, September 6th.
Second.
A motion by Rob, a second by John T. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We got that out of the way. Now, on to discussion of contribution regarding road relinquishments.
Good afternoon, Luke Maston, Highway Supervisor. Following up on the discussion that we had at your last meeting, there are 2 items for the council to consider. One is related to the NDOT relinquishment offer. We discussed that at the last meeting. The commissioners will make a final decision on that relinquishment at their meeting next week. However, the funding provided in that relinquishment would fund the majority of Smith Valley Road. But the commissioners would like to know that the council in some form or fashion, that doesn't have to be determined today, if they do accept the relinquishment agreement, that the county will have funding available to finish out the last part of that project.
And you, I asked you what that date would be, and that is 20, when we had to make the contribution, 2028.
2027 and 2028, the bulk of it being 2028. Yes. So that issue is, like I said, related specifically to the relinquishment itself. Then there's obviously the bigger elephant in the room that also does not have to be figured out today, just what our funding options are to try to tackle as many capital projects as we can. But the short-term need, at least ahead of the commissioners meeting next week, is a comfort level that if they do agree to take the relinquishment, that we will have the funding available to finish that project out.
And if we don't proceed with a relinquishment, how do we get there?
So there is that possibility
Right.
that ultimately the relinquishment agreement is not accepted. That does not change our number one priority capital project, which is Smith Valley Road. Ultimately, that would mean the county has to make up the difference in funding that would have been received from a relinquishment agreement. So realistically, that would ultimately stretch out the completion of that, but would have the benefit of not having to take over maintenance and responsibility of the state roads. So there is the possibility of that being the decision that's made.
Luke, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but have we done any projected cost estimates of what those 3 roads are going to cost to maintain, plow and service for over the next 15 or 20 years?
From a plowing standpoint, I think I touched on this. We're looking at needing to pick up 2 truck driver positions in order to try to keep up with those roads. Those will be, while they are not main routes for NDOT, they become main routes for us due to the traffic volume. Had that roughly estimated at somewhere around 120,000, including benefits and insurance, everything, to pick up 2 positions. I think conservatively, I'm estimating probably 175,000 to 200,000 additional revenue that the county would receive per year, taking those roads into our inventory. I say conservative because that's funding formula is difficult to nail a good number down, but it could be more than that, but that's the numbers that I've calculated for now that I would go with. So the outstanding part of your question is what's the long-term maintenance for those roads? What's that cost? That's something that we're putting together for the commissioner's discussion on Monday. I apologize, I should have had that for this meeting, but there is a cost over the lifespan of the different treatment options that are available.
All right.
You pave a road, potentially can chip seal it a few times, and then whatever that lifespan is, we can calculate an average cost per year of what that would be.
So one major concern that I have with this is 144. With that being an intersection for an interchange for Interstate 69, will there be a need to widen 144 in the near future?
Yes, and 144 is a high priority project. Our section of 144 is. Once traffic gets to Whiteland Road or 135 for the time being, that's where we start to lose some of that traffic volume. So the state section between 135 and Franklin, for the time being, would be fine as a 2-lane road. Our section, at least probably to Whiteland Road, would need to be a 4-lane road.
How much does the state currently have slated to do improvements right now? Do they have anything on paper or?
They do. They have about 5 projects that are currently in progress in some form or fashion. 4 of those are bridge related, either bridge rehabilitation, or small structure related projects. The big ticket dollar item is the repaving of State Road 252. That's about 3.2, maybe 3 point, I can't remember, 3.6. In total, those 5 projects, their current estimates are about $5.2 million.
And that is not part of the relinquishment. We would assume that responsibility.
Yeah, now we wouldn't necessarily have to complete them on the same schedule that NDOT has identified funding for them. But since the need for those projects has already been determined by NDOT, would be in our best interest to figure out a way to fund them as we can.
Thanks, Luke.
So your standards and the state standards are different on repairs or?
We try to follow state standards for the work that we do. Where we would see a difference here in taking these roads on. For example, the type of asphalt you use on a higher volume road is different than what you might use on a local road. So there was some additional costs, per ton costs if we were paving a road, for example. Now those same asphalt types, we would still have to use on some of our higher volume roads and have before, like Smith Valley, for example, the last time that we paved it. So, but yeah, there are different classifications of asphalt if you're paving a road, and it all depends on what your traffic volumes are. So it would be a little more expensive than, say, paving a 500 vehicle a day road.
Do you know if the state has other relinquishments going on at this time?
I believe they have either completed relinquishments or are in conversations throughout the state in similar situations. Our situation would be a little unique, obviously, with the need driven from I-69 and the funding there, but there are throughout the state conversations that NDOT has. And these roads are difficult for them to take care of, particularly if they're dealing with, in our case, US 31 and I-65. Certainly they become high priority roads for us. Whether we can afford to keep them, I mean, obviously that's the question when it comes to the relinquishment. Can we keep them up to the level that they need to be? Or at least to the level that NDOT has so far.
Do you know what condition the base of the road is in? When they were constructed? I mean, did they use?
We asked for pavement cores on all 3 of those roads, and we have those. They have pretty good, pretty thick asphalt sections. One of the things that we found that I would say probably holds true there is a lot of our roads, just due to their age, have very good compaction, particularly in the middle of the road where the road used to be narrow. So the state roads were probably some of the first roads that the county had. I wouldn't have really any concern about the subgrade just due to the age. And then, as I mentioned, on top of that, they have pretty good asphalt sections in addition to that.
Hey, I wanted to ask you something here. So what is it you know about Morgan County? Did they relinquish the roads, or what was their decision and how they handled it?
The only road I'm familiar with for Morgan County would be State Road 44. That is currently a state road from 37 west. I am not aware of Morgan County and NDOT having any discussion about potentially relinquishing that part west of 37. They could be, but I'm not familiar with that. I've not heard anything.
Luke, with what you know right now, if we were to partake in the relinquishment, what is your opinion as far as relinquishment or not? Which is the best value for the taxpayer, in your opinion?
The relinquishment obviously comes with challenges, right? There's no such thing as free money. At the dollar amounts that we've discussed with NDOT, I think it's seriously worth considering. I am on the fence because I'm obviously the one that has to figure out how to maintain those new roads that we take on. But I would say what the thought that has pushed me towards the relinquishment potentially being a good idea is not Smith Valley Road. It's the fact that a large chunk of that project, which is our #1 project, could be paid for with non-local funds, allowing us to move down the list of capital projects that need to be done and try to tackle some of the more rural projects or use a portion of that money to help with the neighborhood reconstruction work. So the deal or the offer is take the relinquishment, put the money towards Smith Valley Road. In reality, it's not Smith Valley Road that benefits from taking the relinquishment. It's all the other projects down the list through the rest of the county that we can potentially get to. But that is with the assumption that the dollar amount is what we've discussed. And obviously, we do have some weighing to determine if we think that is a fair dollar amount for the long-term maintenance of the roads we've been taking over.
In reality, when you're putting these on spreadsheets, the net difference is 35 million. That if you have on one side of the spreadsheet, the road maintenance, which you said was $100,000 a year, is correct? Not, excuse me, the clearing snow and.
To take on 2 new full-time positions is roughly 120, but including benefits. to
Okay.
add new positions.
So that's one column, and 120,000 a year into 35 million. It'd take a long time for it to not be a benefit. Then you said approximately 5 million for potential future roads that may have to be replaced.
That would be projects that NDOT currently has programmed within the
Okay.
next 5 years is usually how far they program them out. So those are projects they've already started design on. They've already set funding aside for those projects. As the relinquishment stands, we would take those over.
Okay.
There'd be a transfer of design and that. And
All right, so you deduct that from the 35 million, it leaves 30 million that we, like you said, don't have to, that we can allocate to other projects, not the total 30 million, but the difference. I don't see how it's not, somebody has to convince me how it's not a good idea. I don't know what the downside is because I can't get the net numbers to come back and say it isn't a good idea because our cost is.
Well, Ron, it's gonna be a lot more than 120,000 plus whatever the materials cost to provide the employees, the truck and salt and all of that. It's these road projects that are gonna have to happen 10 or 15 years from now. We have to repave those long stretches.
Right. And he just answered that, said approximately 5 million.
well, that's for specific projects that NDOT currently has underway.
It's not redoing all the roads.
So at some point, I mentioned 252 as one of those projects. NDOT currently has been moving towards paving that. At some point, we would have to pave 144 again. It was just paved a few years ago, but down the road, we would have to do that when it's needed. At some point, 44 will need to be paved.
What,
again.
some point,
Yeah.
right, but at
That's
what
what we
point are we
take on.
using all of the 35 million is my point.
Well,
But realistically, it's gonna be, if you were looking at how far, at doing a comparison, it's gonna be pretty far down the road
Yeah.
before we hit. Sorry, that was not intended to be a pun. It's gonna be a long time in the future before we would hit that break even point where we would have spent $35 million.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Because we're still gonna have to spend that 35 million or 50 million. What's the total for Smith Valley Road?
55.
55 million. If we don't accept the 35 million, we're still gonna have to spend the 55 million and not have any of those monies to do the other potential projects that we could have done. That when you say we were taking that money and allocating it for other projects.
So the dollar amount that's missing is what Councilman Eisen had asked for originally was, what is that cost per mile of paving a road, chip sealing it so many times over that lifespan? That I wish I had for you today. That is something that we are intending to provide for the commissioners at their meeting on Monday.
so do you think that chip and seal process is going to continue on? And is volume increasing on those roads where they might possibly not be able to sustain a chip and seal? That's pretty dangerous.
I, believe it or not, am pretty confident in our chip seal. Was always a bad word for a long time. We put a lot of work in over the last 6 or 7 years. Part of that was looking at how NDOT handled their chip seal and their material. So I'm fairly confident that that is a very reasonable surface treatment to prolong the life of the asphalt. Now, 252 NDOT has chip sealed, 44 NDOT has chip sealed. They have not chip sealed 144. I don't know that I would chip seal 144 either. Of all three of those roads, that one has the largest traffic volume.
It doesn't reflect whether any support is required, but just I have a couple of questions about the intersections with the state roads. On 252 particularly, and with 31, those are not the most ideal intersections. And can we get some kind of guarantee from the state that they won't force us to improve those intersections at our cost?
So any intersection of a local road with a state road, the intersection itself is NDOT's responsibility, and they govern what happens there. Now, the intersection you mentioned at 252 and 135 also has the County Road 300 West intersection very close. If we wanted to find some sort of solution to realigning that, we could definitely do that. But as far as like the signal and the turn lanes and that kind of thing, that is at a state road intersection, that is NDOT's responsibility.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walls, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, he is, I'll tell you, my problem with this is we're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, this meeting should ideally take place after the commissioners decide what they're going to do, because how we proceed may very well depend upon the decision they made, especially when it comes to the discussion on funding sources. Because how much money are we gonna need? Are we gonna need an extra 35 million? Or are we going to do the relinquishment. I think it's hard for us to make these calls today without knowing what the appetite of the commissioners are. Or is our.
The final decision on how much funding overall we're able to put towards the capital project list is not, it's not something that needs to be decided today. I think you're correct in that that final decision may be affected, of the council may be affected or impacted by whether or not the relinquishment agreement is accepted. At a minimum, if we do take the relinquishment agreement, we're going to need to commit that final $20 million to finish Smith Valley Road out, even if we don't do anything else as far as trying to fund additional capital projects. So if there's a consensus that at a minimum, we're going to try to find a way to fund at least that dollar amount, I don't know that we have to get, and we're not ready to honestly get too far into the weeds. I think there's still a lot of discussion that needs to be had. But we can't commit to the relinquishment if we decide to do that, if we're not going to find that money that would be needed to finish the project out.
I mean,
And the request that commissioners made was they wanted something more than okay. They wanted a vote that we would attempt to find some of that funding, not that we would vote on where the funding is coming from, correct?
Yes.
So as I asked Commissioner Walls that day, what did he need? He needed more than okay. He wanted us to go on record that we would attempt to find the funds for the 25 or the 15 million, right? 25 million that we would attempt, not that we had to decide today where it came from, so that they would feel comfortable accepting going forward with a relinquishment. Is that what you requested? Am I phrasing it correctly? Yeah, he's shaking. He let the record show he's shaking his head. Yes.
well, and
I'm letting Luke answer this today. I mean, if you want me to talk to you, I'll talk to you, but I would much rather Luke answer the rest of it.
I think and please, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you're looking for today is a commitment from each of us, which I think that from our last meeting and this conversation, I think that we're all committed to the infrastructure improvement project. I think we're probably going to have some lengthy discussions is when it comes to the method of funding. But for the purpose of moving this meeting forward, what you're needing is that we, to me, this, I don't know that it's even worth anything, because everyone up here could turn around and change their mind, but it's not an official vote. But you want to know that the majority of this body is committed to finding funding for the remainder of the project if the commissioners approve it.
Correct.
Okay.
And I believe they wanted that commitment on record, not just, are you committing to it? That they wanted, a statement by
Can we
us.
take
I'm
a
not going to
vote?
call it official vote, but an aye or a no that we would make the commitment. Is that,
I think
here
it's-
comes Commissioner Wall.
It's a comfort level, and I'll let Commissioner Walls discuss that, but
Sheena, can we take a vote on this?
You don't need to
Okay.
have it necessarily,
Okay.
but I think Kevin has something to add.
I just want to say, I'm committed to come up with funding to fix the roads. I don't know if the taking over 252, 144, and 44 is the best idea. That's just me. That's the hard thing to swallow.
Thank you for caveating that. Kevin Walls, Johnson County Commissioner. I'd ask for the commitment on the 20 million. If I was the council, I would plan on 55 million because the relinquishment is not done. Smith Valley Road is a high priority that needs to be taken care of. So from your standpoint, I would look at the full $55 million. I would not just look at a 20 million because the relinquishment deal is not done. As Luke stated earlier, that's still, and I've said it before, it's a work in progress. We've got it's just a work in progress. I'll leave it at that. But I would implore the council to look at it as a holistic view and look at it as a $55 million project. If the relinquishment does come through, then we can readjust and it's a lower adjustment. But I would implore you guys to look at the 55 million. It's not just a $20 million deal. The relinquishment with the long-term care of these roads, Luke's still working on numbers for that. And like I've always said, this has been in motion the whole time. But we've got a tight time frame on this. And that's what I would just implore you for today is to look at it from a $55 million view, not a $20 million view.
I think we should look at a higher number than that.
Well, Luke addressed you guys with $106 million for all the road improvements. I mean, there's going to be more coming down the road because we are, like we've talked about, the growth is just unbelievable right now within the county. And we're going to have a lot more issues down the road other than the Smith Valley Road. But that is our number one priority right now because of the interchange.
Well, that was my point. I mean, this one project, 55 million, whatever, there's other roads in the county that needs to be addressed. And I think we need to look at it bigger than just Smith Valley Road. We
Yes.
need to look.
We need sustainable funding for the next 20 years because there's going to be a lot of projects coming down the pike at us.
I understand, and I agree with you, John. But I think the quandary here is the commissioners are faced with a dilemma that the state is providing to them. So I'm in support of doing a commitment for the 55. And if we need to do a consensus on that or whatever, I would be in support of it. That would enable him to then see what he needs to do, see what they need to do with the state. They'll be able to make that decision.
So I guess I have a question here. I've been kind of mulling over in my head. So the jail lit that we have going on right now, and with the jail being done, the money that we are still taking in for that goes into the general fund, is that correct?
Not correct.
It goes a separate fund?
Correct. It goes into, for lack of a better term, the jail lit fund, from which the debt service is paid, the bond payment. And then we are allowed to appropriate money from that for the operation of correctional facilities, which can include the jail, community corrections, and others, and for the construction of correctional facilities to include community corrections, future jail expansions, and so forth. But it's not a general fund balance from which we can.
So it sits there and accumulates and does it earn interest on that account?
I don't know if those funds are invested. I'm assuming they're invested, but treasurer would need to speak to that. What our latitude on that is appropriating jail operating expenses to that, which are currently a general fund expenditure, a general fund appropriation. And for 2021, we appropriated $1,465,000 of jail operational expenses to come out of the jail lit fund, thereby freeing up that same dollar amount out of the general fund. So we could move up to, and I think the 2021 budget rounded for jail operations was $7,156,000. That would have been the max that I would have recommended if we chose to move that entirely to the jail lit and free that corresponding amount from the general fund, which that general fund money then could be appropriated by the council to fund capital need projects.
You said 7 million?
That was the number for 2021. We'll see the 2022 jail operational budget, I'm sure, come October, well, September, October.
And the bond debt service is about.
The bond debt service is the bond debt, sorry. The bond debt service for 2021 is 4,725,000. Part of the overall number is just over 5 million, but we still had some money in the sinking bond. It's called a sinking bond fund that was captured first, drawn down to zero. And then the jail lit will be hit for 4,725,000 this year, approximately, for debt service.
But those
This
questions,
is 2022.
those questions speak to the larger amount of how we're going to fund
Right.
all road projects as opposed to the first part of what we're doing today is to make a commitment to the commissioners of that we would accept the responsibility for funding the difference on Smith Valley Road, which would allow you to move forward with the allocation or the relinquishment from the state. Correct. That's all we're doing in the
Partially.
first part of this.
Partially correct. What I talked about was the full 55 million would be the commitment I would look at, because Smith Valley Road has to be completed with or without the relinquishment.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
the 55 million would be what I would be asking the council to come to a consensus on today,
Mhm.
because I can't tell you what that vote's going to be on Monday. As far as we're going to accept it or not accept it.
So my stance on it is I am committed to the total infrastructure project that was presented, all of the roads. The county roads are in dire shape. We could kick the can down the road, or we can tackle it. I think that's been said several times. I think, like I said, where this discussions went several times, there are different funding mechanisms that can be used. I will only support the funding mechanism, and Rob, we could talk about this in a minute. Rob has done a really good job of putting some different scenarios together. But I think that there's no way, and I'll just publicly say, I don't think there's any way we can do this without an edit tax. My concern is I think that we have funding options available through that we already have implemented, one being the jail lit, to transfer some of the operating expenses out of the general fund into the lit, freeing up funds to tackle some of these projects. Therefore, minimizing the effect on the taxpayer by reducing that edit tax. That is what I will support, but I'm only one of 7 up here. But as far as a commitment to these projects, yes, you have my commitment to doing everything we can to get it done, so long as it is at a minimal impact on the taxpayer.
I agree with Jim. I mean, I don't want to look at just one project, Smith Valley Road. I think we need to look at the bigger picture and look at all of them. And I'm sorry, I disagree with Jonathan down there, but he's focused on this one project. I don't want to throw support just for one project. I want multiple projects in this.
What has brought us to the focus on Smith Valley Road is the relinquishment agreement with the state. That's why I think everybody's focused on Smith Valley Road. I am in it for the bigger picture, but Smith Valley Road is the first one on the docket. It will take more in-depth discussion, I think, between the commissioners and the council to look further down the road for the larger package that Luke put in front of you a couple of weeks ago, the 106 million. So, but the first and foremost is this, and it has a time frame on it. That's why everybody's focused on Smith Valley Road right now.
Sure.
So
If you want to present it a different way, where it's just not the 50 million, I'd support it.
106 million.
Well, we're not officially taking a vote today. I think the only person we haven't heard from is Pete. Do you have any comments?
I agree with the long range total road construction projects being done. But I also, as a lesser part of that, I agree with and would support the relinquishment to, initially.
It's a
I-
bigger
I don't see-
discussion, but
I
I think
don't-
we need to really have these discussions.
Yeah, I don't think just doing one eliminates the other. I think they work together. I don't see how they don't work together.
Yeah, and I don't think that was my intent when I was speaking about the 55. I mean, that was just enabling the commissioners to go forward with their discussions with the state on Monday. And I don't know if it's the council's desire to go forward with something on the edit today. That was something I was not aware of. So,
Well, I think I specifically made it that I believe the support of the 55 million with the relinquishment gives us a very clear balance sheet of how long we'd have to spend and how much we'd have to spend before we didn't come out reasonably equal. So I support what you requested. And I don't know if we're giving you more than this today, but I'm supportive of it.
I think it's a pay me now or pay me later type of scenario. I think there's a reason why the state wants to relinquish those roads to the county. However, I mean, like I said, 6.5 dozen, which one do you pick? And unfortunately, you have the job of picking.
We will do that Monday. We will make sure and get that done Monday.
Okay. So is everyone comfortable with moving on to item C, which is the discussion of possible funding sources for the road improvement projects?
Does Luke and the commissioners have what they need
Yeah, what you need.
to move forward?
Yeah, we'll make a decision on Monday.
Great.
There's still some information, like I've told you all along, I negotiated to the best of my ability to get to the point we're at. And we'll have to see where the cards fall on Monday.
Okay.
There's still it's still fluid and it's still in motion.
Right.
so you have the commitment from the
Thank you.
total council?
Thank you. Yes.
Am I not speaking out of turn?
I just,
I know.
I'm just taking it all in and I'm not, I think we ought to go with the relinquishment if the offer is still there. But
As I said again, and I'll say it again, it is still fluid and it's still in motion. I'm still
Right.
working
if
on
it's
that.
still there,
Still working on that.
but this is why I hated it when we put the entire county in debt for a library, knowing that there's going to be bigger projects. I hate doing this to the taxpayers. And that, I just think that if you're going to do something like that, it has to be for something that really truly benefits everyone. And I just don't think the library does. So I don't know. I'm for moving some of the money from the jail lit over and the relinquishment if it's still there. And everything else I'm not committing to.
Is there anything else that you need that you're looking for?
Not on this. There'll be more next Monday when we have a joint meeting.
Okay.
Vote the right way Monday.
From what I've heard, the majority of the council is in favor of getting,
I would say the Smith Valley project would be the first on the project, but the total projected project costs today are 106 million.
and I understand it's sort of an unorthodox.
I know. And I
Situation
understand
here
that
because-
because we're pressured with time from a deadline and it came quick and there's been some changes that we have to address and deal with.
Sure.
And we're trying to get that done, but I think it's more for the taxpayers where you guys are making your decision commitment to move the county forward in infrastructure because we desperately need it.
Right.
And I think somebody said the can has been kicked down the road numerous times. Well, it's hit the wall now. And you are the people sitting in those seats to move it forward. So I thank you. for your
Understood.
consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to discussion of possible funding sources. I'm gonna give the floor to Rob as he has put the numbers together for us.
Thank you, Jim. You have a 5-page handout. And some of it you've seen before, probably pages 2 and 3 are most familiar. Page 5, I'm going to start kind of on page 5 and work our way back. Page 5 is a revised estimate that Jeff Peters prepared at my request. You'll see that in this scenario, bottom right, you'll see a lit rate of 0.41. That lit rate would generate for the county revenue of about $8,187,500. It generates additional revenue that would be shared with cities and towns in the county. That information was, I think, shared in a prior handout, but it's not part of today's conversation. You'll see the dollar amount of interest expense associated with this 20-year, if we were to bond and get the lump sum of cash to tackle the capital needs that have been prior mentioned. The bond rate environment has shot up from the last 8 to 9 weeks ago. You'll see that Jeff has modeled out a rate of 5%. So this really was a choke number for me to see that in 20 years, interest expense would be nearly $49 million. I don't find that as a viable option. So that got thinking about. Now, if we could jump back to page 1. I'm kind of calling this the pay as we go program, and it's a hybrid plan. And I can illustrate till the cows come home. I mean, if we want to narrow it down and on a number or a scenario, I can do that. But this is the one I went with, where there is a significantly lower edit rate of 0.25%. So I just extrapolated that dollar amount from Jeff's number. That would be annual receipts to the county of approximately $4,873,000. This also builds in a relinquishment go forward green light scenario. You will see that the line item that says county money for Smith Valley Road, and you'll see there's money programmed in 2025 and 2027. That would correlate back to the table that Luke gave us, table number 3 on the road relinquishment project, where those county dollars are programmed. I asked Luke to kind of help me with their fiscal year and our calendar year. So I took a conservative approach. He has fiscal year 2028 is when the county would have the outlay of the 19,522,000. I put it in calendar year 2027 because I'm just not sure. So I just kind of stepped it up a year. But that's the tie back, right? So the rest of the money, referring to Luke's table, you'll see the NDOT federal of 35 million and the 20,672,000 and change is the county. Our county dollars on my spreadsheet tie back to that. So this assumes a yes on relinquishment. If we want to model it out differently, again, I can do that. So starting from the top, the other kind of assumption here is that my understanding is the county through the commissioners need to show NDOT that we have a plan. We have a source, we have dollars on hand to satisfy this money before they begin to program their money, or my words, but that's kind of the thought. So you'll see that in this calendar year, 2022 period, number 1, I'm kind of looking at ways where we could source this money that by 2026, 2027, we have sufficient cash on hand to satisfy that requirement and also begin to tackle those other capital needs that have been identified. So for illustration purposes, I show that in this year, the council would potentially reappropriate jail expenditures from the general fund over to the jail lit. We've done that to the tune of $1,465,000, but this would be an additional appropriation. that their right frees up 3,500,000 this calendar year. Then going down, I put an appropriation from rainy day fund of 1,500,000 in both this calendar year and next calendar year. Again, that's with the rainy day fund, it's kind of assuming it's an applicable use. That would be a thought as in my opinion, an appropriate use, but again, it's up to the will of the council. And then beginning in 2023 is when we would see the edit take place. Recall the timeline from the other meeting. We would need to pass the edit ordinance by August, end of August, in order for everything to take effect and start the county begin to receive money come January 1 of 2023. And you see that number there. I take into account no increase in the basis for this. It's income driven. So as county income goes up, or the income earned by county residents goes up, in theory, this would go up. It could go down. But I've just plugged it at kind of a stale number. And then on a go forward basis, I've plugged in 3.5 million coming that would free up from the general fund. So we would appropriate from the general fund 3.5 million. How we're getting that is we're going to take jail expenditures and appropriate it to the jail lit. So in 2023, in 2022, there's the rainy day that would stop after that. And then the rest of the time in this scenario, in this 10-year scenario, we would be funding these capital needs through appropriation of the general fund that otherwise would go to the jail, and we would fund it through edit receipts. And what I've done is you'll see a cumulative total, and you can see that build up. You'll see our expenditures for Smith Valley, and if I've done this correctly, those dollars beyond that are available then for other capital improvement projects. I mentioned earlier the jail operational budget for 2022 was 7,156,000. In theory, that could be the number we go to. I picked about half that rate for this illustration. The other piece of this that I want to point out is it is a unfavorable environment to go to the bond market, but that may not be the case in 2 to 3 years. In 2 to 3 years, rates may have decreased or stabilized, and it might be that this body, this council, 2 to 3 years from now may say, you know what, let's take that edit and let's go leverage that edit into debt service and get that big pot of money to throw at these capital needs. So it doesn't take that option off the table. It just delays it for a future time when the rate environment might be more favorable. So this is what I would call the hybrid pay as we go.
Before you go to the next page,
Yep.
Rob, could you roughly tell us how the 0.25 edit impacts the taxpayer?
Yes, so I will go back to answer that. And if you go to page 5 in Jeff Peters' illustration, and I'm gonna get that number. I guess got to do some quick math. He took an assumption that at a 0.41 lit rate, the annual impact to someone or household or an individual with income of 72,440 would pay $297. So if we were to take 25,
Just a relative number for that.
bear with me. So at 0.25, using that same median income number of 72,440, that 297 is reduced to 181 at that level.
Now, does this edit affect social security?
I have been told by Jeff it does not.
Okay.
It does not impact Social Security earnings or Social Security benefits.
So what level does it start?
What do you?
Well, I mean, if it's not affecting those on social security,
If you earn income other than that, then it's subject, my understanding is subject to tax.
0.25% would go to this infrastructure lit.
it would be edit that we would use for infrastructure purposes. Yeah. That's the thought.
And at that rate, it would affect what they have deemed as the average household income, approximately $15 a month.
So the other part of our conversations from prior meetings have been, well, what's that do to the jail lit? So I included on pages 2 and 3, the jail lit. This was dusted off at the end of last year for budget purposes. So I feel really good about like line number, row number 24, the contractual debt payment. Those come straight out of Mike Reuter's fiscal plan. The revenue, again, it's a hard number. These are estimates out of the fiscal plan. And then starting cash balances, any cash balances for 2020, those are actual. 2021 was an estimate at the time, and then and go forward with an estimate. So, but look at row 6, all the way over column I, where it says 2025 and beyond, it says 0.2. This is if the 0.2 stays out. This will sunset. And this assumes that it will continue at that rate, its current rate, until it sunsets. And the total receipts, then you come down to row 23, the total receipts from inception to sunset would be approximately $204 million, of which nearly 26 is used to retire the debt. That leaves cash balance after debt service of 178 million approximately. And then this is where I threw in operational expenditures. You'll see that what we've already programmed for 2022, the 1,465,000. And then I put in, I think, a 50% clip at a 3% annual increase going forward to get to that 66 million, leaving a ending cash balance of about 111 million. Keep in mind, at any point in time, if we want to move to 7 or future councils where they want to use this cash to construct a community correction facility, that's what this is there for. That was the intent of the council at the time. And that is that scenario. Page 3 is the same illustration, except the future council in 2025 would honor the non-binding wording and language that the council that adopted it had, which is once the debt service is retired, the rate is cut in half, and then you can see the same scenario play out. Well, that would basically, I'll say, give back to the taxpayer half of what they had been paying at that point in time by reducing the tax rate. So this is important, I believe, because we talked about this being a component of funding, either pay as we go or in lieu of an edit, or in the case of page 1, a hybrid, right? So it's not the total solution. It's there to show you if we do these things, these levers are pulled, this is what the jail lit looks like. This is what annual revenue would look like for capital need programming that Luke and the commissioners have given us. I can model this without any edit rate and see how it looks. I can shift more into the jail lit as appropriate for modeling. I just need a little bit more direction, but I wanted to step off with this and show you what we can look at, and I can have that ready by when we meet Monday. By Monday, if I get a little bit more.
Hey, Rob, to your knowledge, is there any opposition from any other elected official or department heads using the jail lit in this manner that you know of?
Excuse me, to my knowledge, no. I think there would be opposition from even yours truly if we were to move the full 7,156,000 over. I feel like at that point, we're how I saw that buildup and pot of money was to prevent future councils from having to bond, from having to pay bond expenses again, from having to pay bond interest again to do a community corrections facility, for example. This to me, and at the rate that we're paying on this compared to where it is today, that's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of savings down the road. So
Mhm.
I would find opposition at some number, say, certainly at 7, probably north of 4.5 or 5 is when I would start to get, a little opposed.
Well, Rob, thank you
Yes.
very much for putting that together. This is exactly what I was looking for. I don't want to split hairs. I'd like to see that down to 0.2 instead of 2.5, with a little more transferred out of the jail lit. My thought process on that is the taxpayers are already paying the jail lit. That's going to have a substantial amount of, even tackling some future projects, a substantial amount of money left over that can be used for these road projects, thus reducing the impact of the edit. But I would definitely support the hybrid plan. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together.
You're welcome.
I guess the way I look at it is the taxpayers have done what they're supposed to do. I mean, they came to the table and they gave the support for the jail. And I feel like we need to move the entire amount over. I understand that, yes, in the future, there may be this and that. But we can't keep nickel and diming the taxpayers. And if the money is there, we need to utilize that first.
I want to clarify on your page 1. When it says total for the period, for example, let's go to 2024. Because we're right on the heels of 2023 here and coming up on our future budget. So let's look at 2024. 8,373,000 total for the period. That's what's available for potential expenditures for roads is what you're saying, correct?
This is the jail.
No, the number 1, the first page.
So,
That's not jail, this is roads, right?
right. So, correct. For that period in this illustration, the county for purposes of capital needs that have been identified and known today, for that period, we would have collected 8,373,000. And then for the prior year, 2023, been 9.8. So the cumulative total is at 23.2. And that was kind of the number that I was targeting in order to give comfort to the commissioners to go to the state and say, this is a hybrid model. It's not done yet. We haven't passed the lit ordinance, but this illustration shows that we can cover our requirement if you cover your requirement with the relinquishment dollars of 35 million and the string attached to it, which is Smith Valley Road.
Yeah, but I'm saying the amount that's available to spend is 8.3.
The amount that's available to spend is the cumulative total. That is the total for the period is what was collected for that, in this case, that calendar year.
But if you don't, the next year goes up, and if you don't spend it for the road, if we're talking about road funding. So there's the cumulative will go down, it won't go up because you have the expenditures, correct?
Yeah, the only expenditure I've shown here is the Smith Valley Road. So in 2025 and 2027, those numbers tie back to Luke's table number 3. And then the ending where it says remaining for other capital needs, that's what Daniel and Luke and the commissioners and future councils could say, all right, there's 30 million after we pay 2027, our 19 million for Smith Valley, we should have about 27 million still on hand for other projects.
Right, but I'm saying that not, you're only looking at Smith Valley. If we were to move on other projects, it would be coming out of the 30 million.
They'd be coming out of the last number, remaining dollars for other capital
Right.
needs.
That's what I'm saying.
So if Luke and Daniel and the commissioners said, well, let's put in, there was like some right of way construction and all this. If we started programming those dollars in here and Luke has the spreadsheet to where he can
Right.
do that. It should adjust automatically.
Yeah, but this is only looking at Smith Valley.
This is only looking at Smith Valley.
Right.
That's the only thing that was priority one. And that was whether we have relinquishment or not, how do we get to Smith Valley?
Right.
So in short, Ron, after the 10-year period in paying for the Smith Valley Road project, there would be $61 million
right. I'm
left
getting
over for, okay.
I'm just simply saying that this chart doesn't assume that we're not going to go ahead and do other projects before and in addition to Smith Valley.
Well, it doesn't assume that. It's not there because we don't know what projects we're gonna tackle.
Well, that's part of what.
It's showing what money's left to do those projects, but yes, if what you're saying is the totals will decrease by whatever the project cost is, then yes.
Because we're looking at the moving forward, not just on Smith Valley, but other projects. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Rob. This is well thought out. The 3.5 million frees up the general fund and that allows for other capital improvement projects.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you also.
Well, you're welcome. And I can plug in Jim's number. I can, in one illustration, I can take Melinda's, her desire to see the entire jail op budget shifted over. I can run that. And I can run that one without any edit, which I think is what you're getting to, is not taxed. So I can run that scenario. So I've got 2 additional scenarios to run. And if Luke and Daniel, if you guys want to talk about when you want to drop in it's just a matter of adding some line items and some numbers, give you an idea.
Well, and one of the things that John said was, looking at projects outside of White River Township, that it wasn't just exclusive White River Township. And this chart only has Smith Valley. So that, whatever percentage would be outside of, White River Township would be something that we're asking to be done too, to discuss. I thought not just Smith Valley, that we're looking at the future of all road funding, and Rob's showing the potential funding and cumulative amounts that we have to do other things, other roads, which is a substantial number.
Hey, Rob, what is the increments allowed by the edit? You have 0.25 is a working number here. Jim mentioned 0.20. What's the least and what's the most?
Yeah, I think you can go up by an 1/8. I would double check that with Jeff Peters, but I think you can go in increments of an 1/8, which is 0.125. I think. So we can go up or down. I can put any number in. And so while we're on that, I took the Indiana County tax rates and I highlighted the surrounding counties. All right, so we're currently at 1.2. 1 is our normal income tax. The 0.2 is the jail lit. So we're at 1.2%. Presently today, only one other neighboring county is, and it's really not a neighbor, but it's in the Indy Metro. Hamilton County is at 1.1, Hendricks 1.7, Hancock 1.94, Shelby 1.6, Morgan 2.72, Marion 2, Madison's 2.25, Bartholomew 1.75, Boone 1.5. So even if we were to move in with this quarter, this 0.25, we're still lower than everybody with that increase, except Hamilton County. They would still be lower than us. So it's not to say that it makes it right or wrong. That decision's here, but perspective, I think, can go a long way with maybe making a decision.
I think also the thing to note is our county is growing probably faster than those other counties. We're in the top 10 in the state.
But the problem is, oh, I'm
Excuse me,
sorry.
could I complete?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're in the top 10 in population, but in the lower portion in the tax collected. So I think, prior councils and this council have been very conservative. And I think this proposal that you have here, Rob, is also conservative and a good solution. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is we can always increase it, but you can't always decrease it. Or generally, you never see taxes decrease. So I would say if something has to be passed, we should go with the least amount first.
Yeah, I agree with your thought. That's why I'll go back to my term, non-binding resolution. This council can't bind a future council with that action to decrease it. So that's why we came up with that language and anyway, that you're right, but you're absolutely right.
Any further discussion? Okay. Any comments from the audience? Is there anyone that wishes to speak on any matters that we discussed today? You would approach the podium, state your name, and just keep in mind that we do have a 5-minute per person time limit.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Cheatham. I live in northern Johnson County. And there hasn't been a lot in the papers, but my question is, I know the short-term advantage to doing this relinquishment of the state to the county roads looks good on paper, but what's the long-term picture? When you go out, maybe, we talk 20 years from now, it's hard to picture what it could be, but you look what's going on the east side of the county along 65 and all the growth that's there and all the roads that are having to be improved. If the county takes on the burden of all those roads, then what happens in the future as industry fills in or subdivisions? I mean, you've got bridges to maintain or replace, you've got culverts and drainage systems, you've got all the greenway maintenance, the grass cutting and the brush cutting and everything that has to be done along those roads. Eventually, do you have to put in roundabouts, all the big intersections like Southern Crossing down in Bartholomew County? Who pays for that? Is that something that the state will fund if there has to be bridge work, or is that something that the county's going to get stuck with down the road? Because I think looking at the changes that are going on now in northern Johnson County, that the building and development is going to go crazy along those roads a lot sooner than we think. And taking a little bit of money now is going to end up costing everybody a lot more down the road, is what I'm afraid of. And I'm old, I may not be here, but I would hate to see the county and the citizens get stuck with a huge bill down the road for road improvements, widenings, or whatever has to occur as all these roads, 252, 144, 44, as they get to the point where they have to be widened or more improved intersections have to be put in. I just feel like we have to look farther out than 10 or 15 years, because it's going to be a real big problem for the citizens if we, and plus I don't like the idea that they're rushing you guys on this. I feel like, like you're being sold a deal that isn't going to be a good deal down the road. That's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's why I wanted to know what Morgan County, how they handled it. I wanted to know about what they decided in Morgan County, what their options were.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So if I, just sir, come on up. If I read this correctly, it's about a little over 23 road miles that is part of the relinquishment. And if we take Luke's number of on the top end of his range estimate of 200,000 a year coming in, by adding that road inventory, those roads are to our inventory, we in turn get more money annually to the tune of about 200,000. Now there's cost to that. I mean, there's initial outlays of vehicles and equipment needs, but so you don't know what, I love this. You don't know what you don't know. And I'm that way too. The thing with the state is if that development does happen, and the state now, it's their dime to improve it if they want to improve it. That's the thing. We don't own it. We don't control it. They own it. They control it. They can choose or not choose to do anything with it. And that's the part that when I was on the city council in Franklin and we did a relinquishment with the state for the roads out here, it gave us control. It gave us a lump sum money and it gave us control. And we parlayed that lump sum with the Indianapolis MPO to get more dollars and take control of and address needs that our constituents wanted done at that point in time. They didn't want to wait till NDOT's time. It became our timeline. So there's good and bad, and I understand that. And that's one of those questions that no one could ever answer, even at NDOT, what's the impact 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years down the road? You can't quantify it. You just can't. The best thing we can say is we'll have revenue based on today's revenue structure. We'll have revenue coming in, and we'll have to buy some equipment and to maintain, and people to put in that equipment to maintain them. So there's cost, but maybe I'm talking in circles, and I apologize if I am. But if we own it and there's development down there, then it's up to us to make that improvement, and hopefully it gets done, or it may spur development as well if we can kind of control our roads. So I hear you. I'm not sold on it. Jim was the first guy who was like, if they're giving us 35 million for it, that means it's worth more to them to get rid of it than the 35 million. It is, but I don't know what that number is, and I don't know how far out you take it. I really don't.
I think that's why we kind of all look to Luke, because he is the one that has to maintain it. And I think, in order for us to make an educated decision on this, we need those numbers, which I guess we will have Monday. Sorry, sir. Go ahead. If you would state your name, please.
My name is Len Cheatham. I live in Greenwood. I'm going to ask 2 questions, so I don't take too much time, and then you can answer them for me. I don't know how wide this project on Smith Valley is. Is it 4 lane? Is it 4 lane with a turn lane? Is it 6 lanes? 6 lanes with a turn lane? Is it 8 lanes? 8 lanes with a turn lane? All of those would be useful in the future. And I think I don't know what the project is. I imagine it's probably 4 lane, which is probably not enough. There's plenty of room on most parts of Smith Valley Road to make that expansion. That's my first question. And the second question is, what you do on Smith Valley will impact Greenwood, and they'll be forced to do, I guess they'll be forced to follow suit. If you have a 4 lane, they'll be forced to go 4 lane, 6 lane, they'll be forced for the 6 lane. So my second question is, how do you coordinate with the city of Greenwood? And I will sit down while they answer those 2 questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm going to defer to Luke on the first, but I can answer the second. The edit tax that we are talking about, each municipality would get a percentage of that. And that percentage is obviously dependent upon which rate we go with. I can tell you that it will be substantial. So the funding source for any improvement projects that the cities need to do should be addressed by that edit tax. As far as coordinating with them, I think that's probably also a question better asked for Luke, since we don't do the operations of the street department or highway department, but I know that they typically work pretty well in letting each other know what the plans are.
Real quick. Thank you, Jim. And sort of to follow with Jim's comment with a number, the county with the edit receipts, the county receives approximately 40.314%. Greenwood, City Greenwood would receive 26.544%. So at that original number, hang on here, the number we talked about today, Greenwood would get, they would get about 3.3 million of additional revenue. And it's certainly our hope that they would utilize that on infrastructure. We can't bind them to that, but that at least gives them a source to, do what you just said. If you go from a 4 to a choke down, at 2, they got to finish that out. And this at least gives them $3.3 million a year to handle that. in this scenario. So I'll stop talking again and now we'll talk.
So on the first question, what would the typical section on the rebuilt Smith Valley Road be? We actually have some images, though I'm sure they'll be difficult to see. We would be looking at a 4-lane road for through traffic, so 2 lanes each direction. But we're looking at options to make sure that traffic keeps moving. Potentially a median with roundabouts about every half mile or so. There is an option to put in a center turn lane, be something similar to what you see at State Road 135. Problem I think we would face that you see on 135 as well is just potential for traffic accidents with people using that lane and so many access points. So, but ultimately it would be 2 lanes each direction and trying to keep traffic moving through the use of roundabouts and by prohibiting left turns in places where it makes sense. Now, in terms of the coordination with the city of Greenwood, obviously they have a long section of Smith Valley Road and a similar challenge to what we have. The east end of our project will tie into some intersection improvements that NDOT is currently designing for the intersection of State Road 135 and Smith Valley Road. So we will coordinate with them on the design and make sure that we tie into those improvements in a way that makes sense. Anything east of 135, it's obviously not under the highway department's control. Certainly, we're happy to coordinate with the city if they would like some input. But realistically, they have the same problem east of 135 that we have west of 135.
And if there's another chart there, that one doesn't show 135, correct?
The last, yeah. So this last one.
There you go.
This is the far east end of the project. We will.
Can you
Makes-
blow that up? Can you blow that up any?
I don't know if you can or not.
The 135?
We will stop, our east terminus will be whatever the western starting point of NDOT's intersection project at 135. And that's noted on this slide. We would be working with the city of Greenwood at the very least, trying to make some improvements at that Reston Road intersection that also has the Home Depot entrance and another commercial entrance as well. Some of that area is within the city limits, so
There
we
you
will
go.
coordinate with them to come up with a solution there.
That's it right there.
Yes. Now, there is a note on all of these slides that says these are preliminary exhibits. We've done survey, but we are still in design on exactly what this would look like, how it will impact property owners. Once we get those actual lines on paper, then we'll be happy to share them with everyone. But just don't get too concerned with what you see right now. We have not moved far enough into design yet to know individual impacts on specific properties.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for posing them. I feel today was pretty productive and kind of at least us as a body taking a step in the right direction and kind of formulating a plan of action. That being said, is there any further discussion from the council on any of these topics? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.